Right, time to take a look at motion blur. So I'm going to jump into my out node and I'm going to, we'll start with the debris. No, let's start with the actual bridge itself. Bridge render, let's grab that in there and go to Anal Geo, render that. There we are, so we've got our bridge. Press H to kind of home that into the center. Let's take a snapshot of that, go to properties, go to motion blur and just turn both of these on. And I think, yeah, we'll have to click render again, see what happens now. Now you can see something kind of crazy is going on there. So, you know, the cables at the top seem to be fine. In fact, we can see some blur there, which kind of looks normal if we let that render up properly. But the actual bridge itself is, you know, a disaster. It just kind of looks crazy. So I'm going to stop that, come out here and jump into our bridge. And we'll see why. If we go to scene view, basically because of this system here, we've got maybe not changing points count numbers, but we do have a changing, the point numbers are changing because kind of geometry is swapping back and forward and things are changing, right? Well, what we could do to check that maybe is if we just kind of select a primitive here, or maybe if we select some points. So if I select, like, let's see, I'm trying to find a piece together. So these points there, and delete those. Oops, that's done something strange. Let's press Z, let's go down here. In fact, after the clean, because that's going to be deleting stuff as well. If we come down here and maybe select again these points, delete those, delete non-selected, and now if I change frame, you can see that disappears and I'm getting a whole different load of points, right? So the point numbers are changing basically is what I'm getting at. So we need to get rid of that. So to calculate our motion blur here, we need to use velocity, right? Which we have if we come here and go to transfer attributes and grab velocity and angular velocity as well. And then if we click on our velocities, we can see from our simulation we've got the velocities there. So then we can use this vector to blur the geometry in the direction of the velocity. Now that's great for the render geometry, for the simulation geometry, but everything else is not coming from the simulation. So this geometry is being bent by the render geometry. So that's by the simulation geometry. So there's no velocity here, and the same on this side as well. So what we need to do very simply is just come here, drop a trail. Okay, and then set this to compute velocity. And there we go. So that's going to look at the frames, the previous frames, to calculate the velocity. And then we've got it there. And then we need to do the same thing on this side. So make sure you do this, very important, before the delete so that the point numbers are not changing. Okay, so I'll do it before we transfer that attribute across. Let's do another trail here and set this to compute velocity as well. Okay, and visualize that. So that's just that kind of rocking animation back and forward. And that means now at the end here, we should have velocity across everything. And the changing point number shouldn't matter. But we have to force that, you know, to use that. We have to force the renderer to use that velocity attribute. So just come to the bridge render here, go to render, sampling, and then say velocity blur there. And that should be it. So I think in Arnold then, if you come to motion blur, you can see this has been ticked. So that's an expression connecting to this as well. So if we go back into the render view, render that again, and hopefully now that will work. There we go. So that's working now. You can see there is blur there, but we've moved one frame. So maybe I'll go back one frame, back to frame 100, render that again, and we'll see the direct comparison between the frames with or without. Okay, so now we can see the motion blur there on the floor. It seems actually, yeah, we didn't have motion blur on the top cables actually. But what we can do is just use the same method. So for the cables, so both cables here, just do the same thing, drop a trail. They don't have changing point numbers, so they should be fine. I'm going to do compute velocity, alt click and drag on that, so just drop one under each of those. We'll have to click render again, and then we should see some blur on the cables as well. There we go. It is subtle, but if you kind of focus like there, where this cable is kind of whipping across, you can see, well, you can see all of them. You know, there's a bit of movement there. This looks great. We won't render it again, but I'll just set it now while I remember. I prefer to change this to end on frame, so that means, you know, the blur will be behind the moving geometry, which kind of makes more sense to me logically. Okay.